Amataklope, Ambetu Washte. Hello, my relatives. Today is a good day. Again, what I'd like to talk about today is the finances of the United States of America, the value of its dollar. You see, I explained a little bit about it on Alex Jones, prisonplanet.com, but I didn't really get into it. You see, prior to the gold standard and after the gold standard was taken off the American dollar and allowed to float like a commodity, like the rest of the world's currencies, what happened is that it had already been established by the United States that the international currency that every country is going to use to buy oil, natural resources, in all types of trade was going to be the American dollar. That was the international currency. Therefore, that allowed the Fed, which is 9 private banks, that allowed the Fed to print money willy-nilly, because they knew that as long as the world was utilizing the dollar as the international currency, no matter how much they cheapened the dollar, everyone had to adhere to it. It's simple but understandable. Now, what happened in the process to finance the debt so they could continue borrowing money to run the government of the United States, they sold T-bills, treasury bonds, and bills to the international community backed by the US dollar. Well, all this time the US dollar had value, but the debt got too big. And therefore the value of the dollar went down. And then people started coming up in the world economically and they started using their own money or transferring it to other international monies to buy goods and services around the world. Okay? Which meant, of course, that the more T-bills and treasury bonds and all of those financial instruments that are backed by the dollar that were sold around the world, you know, you have to buy them back eventually because they're an investment of other countries. So what we have here is countries that bought T-bills or bonds from the United States Treasury as an investment to someday return those bonds with interest, and the United States would have to buy them back, especially at maturity. Well, guess what? The dollar keeps getting cheaper. The other economies go up. Now it's no longer an investment, it's a loss. China owns 40% of the treasury bonds of the United States of America. And those treasury bonds are backed up by the taxpayers' land. In other words, the state parks, not the state parks, the federal parks, the federal forests, you know, all the government land, Bureau of Land Management, etc. Indian reservations, blah, blah, blah. All this land that we have, national parks. So China owns 40% of the land base, the federal land base in America. The rest of the world owns 60%, but not as much as China. Now, none of them can now recoup their investments. So they're going to develop, like the euro and the real and the yuan, very stable currencies right now. They're going to develop an international currency. Already, the Arab states, especially the oil fiefdoms, sheikdoms, especially those, they're already talking about and maybe even now implementing their own currency for the sale of oil. Now, because we're in such debt, it would behoove the United States of America to start a Cold War with China. Hence, Obama's Pacific strategy. We're a debtor nation now, deeply in debt. It's like you with your credit card. You know, you have a $25,000 credit limit, you've maxed it out, the credit card company, you lost your job, and you don't have the money. So what the international community is doing, and now what the United States of America and their corporate news media is doing, is trying to convince you that it's Europe's fault. It's Europe's fault that our dollar's getting cheapened, that we're in a crisis, a financial crisis, we're in a depression is what it is. And it's all Europe's fault because of their credit crisis. It's not a crisis. The most indebted nation in the world is Britain, and you never hear about it. The 3 American rating companies in the world that rate you, Moody's, etc., and they downgraded Spain, Italy, and Portugal, I believe, but they haven't downgraded Ireland, which is the worst of Europe, and England, which is the worst in the world. They have a 900% debt compared to their GDP. The United States of America is 3rd in the world as the most indebted nation. All right, so you got the top 2 countries, England, United States, that are broke. They're literally broke. Republicans, Democrats, they're not going to change anything. They cannot. The United States of America is in debt that they can't pay. So inflation this year is going up 30%, minimum. Over Obama's previous 3 years, it was 30%. So this is why we're in the situation we are. So what we have in the international community is the very wealthy countries that are financially stable, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, called the BRICS. That's the acronym. The BRICS are the ones who are driving the world's finances right now. Now, as we know, Iran has gotten rid of the dollar. The other Arab states that are doing the oil, they're going to switch over to their own currency. So you're going to have to buy in their currency, buy oil, etc. What is happening with the U.S. news media is they're blaming Europe for your misfortune, but it's not your misfortune. It's not going to get better, folks. The Republicans are liars. The Democrats are liars. And they're lying to you massively, and they have been for decades. I don't know how much more proof you need. I mean, you got the biggest liar ever in the White House right now, the House Negro. So what I'm telling you is that as Americans, and I'm talking to the American people, I realize the rest of the world's watching too, so lick your chops, rest of the world. That's an American expression. I'm not going to explain it. what the American people need to do is you've got a clean house. Absolutely clean house. No more Republicans. No more Democrats. You have a constitution. And remember, I've told you over and over again, that's based on Indian law. So I'm a constitutionalist, as you know. At any rate, our money is now considered funny money, monopoly money. It's backed by nothing. Now, look what the corporations have done. They've shipped all the jobs overseas. Europe hasn't done that in their respective countries. They've not shipped any jobs overseas. That's why their euro is going to remain strong. That's why they have a central bank now. And yes, they have debtor nations also. But they have a strong banking system and a strong currency that can weather the storm. I mean, they're going into a recession. We're in a depression. And it's strictly the fault of England and the United States and their greed, their unholy greed. And that's in the international sphere, which you hear nothing about, nor does anyone ever take the time to explain it to you. You know, not your newspapers, none of your news corporations. So you've really got to start gleaning through, and you know, I hope you know what gleaning means, gleaning through the internet for truth. I mean, there's some wild accusations out there, but the truth of the matter is that financial think tanks already know what I'm telling you is the truth. We haven't seen yet the deprivation we're going through. People in this country, you're oblivious. You don't realize what's coming. I and my sons know, and my daughters, and I'm hoping that most of you know. But there's got to be more of us, man. There cannot be one person re-elected in this coming election, national election, or even state elections, but more so the national. And you got to put term limits on. You got to put term limits. You got to clean house out of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is now your legislature. You know? United versus whatever that made corporations persons. You know the one thing about corporations is you can't put them in prison. You can put them in banks. They own the banks. You can put them any place in the world except in prison. There's no penalties for a corporation. Think about that. And think about you buying gold and silver, precious metals, precious stones. That's your investment in the future and right now. But folks, please wake up. Doc Sharkey, I'll see you again.